Have you ever stepped into a house where the air itself feels wrong, where the silence is so heavy? You swear someone is breathing just behind your neck? In St. Louis, Missouri, there's such a place. A grand brick mansion that once symbolized wealth, power, and the American dream. Today, it's called one of the most haunted houses in America. Its name is Lemp Mansion. They say if you walk through its halls at night, you can hear soft footsteps following you, doors closing on their own. And sometimes, if you're unlucky, you'll hear someone whisper your name, but no one will be there. To understand why, you have to know the story of the Lemp family. It's not just about ghosts, it's about a dynasty that rose to unimaginable heights, only to collapse in a spiral of death, madness, and despair. The kind of despair that clings to walls, staining them forever. The Lemp family built an empire on beer. Back in the mid-1800s, America loved beer, and the Lemps were among the first to master refrigeration and underground caves to store it cold. Their brewery made them millionaires, and their mansion reflected that power: 33 rooms, lavish furniture, marble fireplaces, stained glass windows. It was a palace of success. But money doesn't protect you from curses. And if the stories are true, the Lemp Mansion wasn't just a home. It was a trap where, one by one, its owners lost themselves to shadows. The first to fall was the family's patriarch, Johann Adam Lemp, who had brought the brewing business to America. When he died, his son William Lemp Sr. took over. William was a strong man, respected and feared. Under him, the brewery became the largest in St. Louis, but the bigger the fortune grew, the darker the house became. The tragedy began with William's son, Frederick. He was only in his 20s, the bright hope of the family, when he suddenly died. Some said it was mysterious. Others whispered sickness. But in the mansion, Frederick's death was like a spark that lit something sinister. The family began to unravel. Neighbors said the mood of the house changed. Curtains were always drawn. Laughter disappeared. At night, some swore they saw strange figures pacing behind the upstairs windows, long after the family had gone to bed. Then came 1904. That year, William Lemp Sr., the man who had everything, walked into his office in the mansion, pulled out a revolver, and shot himself in the head. The newspapers said it was depression, that he never recovered from his son's death. But the servants whispered another story, that William had been driven mad by voices in the house, voices no one else could hear, and the blood didn't stop there. His daughter Elsa was next. Though she lived outside the mansion, she was plagued by the same darkness. In 1920, she shot herself as well. Her death was only the beginning of more suicides tied to the family and the house itself. The mansion seemed cursed, feeding on despair. Guests who stayed overnight claimed they were touched in their sleep, heard cries echoing from empty rooms, and felt someone pressing down on their chest as if trying to smother them. And yet, the most terrifying part wasn't what was seen, but what was hidden. Because beneath the mansion were limestone caves, the same caves the Lemp Brewery once used to store beer. Dark, cold, and endless. It said the family kept secrets down there. Some claimed they locked away a deformed child, known only as the Monkey Face Boy, a son who was never allowed to leave. Whether he lived and died in that darkness, no one truly knows. But visitors to the caves swear they hear scratching, dragging footsteps, and muffled crying from the shadows. That's when the house's reputation grew. People said it was cursed, that anyone who carried the Lemp name was doomed to die tragically. And history proved them right. After William Sr.'s death, his son Charles moved into the mansion. By then, the family fortune was fading. The brewery had collapsed after Prohibition, and the once proud Lemps became recluses. Charles was known as cold, obsessed with death. He never married, never had children. Instead, he roamed the halls with his dogs, muttering to himself. In 1949, Charles finally joined the others. He shot his dog first, then himself, in the very same house. His body was discovered days later. By then, the mansion had become a mausoleum of memories, room after room touched by tragedy, and yet it still stands. Today, the Lemp Mansion is a restaurant and inn. Guests pay to spend the night where the Lemps died, daring to sleep in haunted bedrooms, and almost every one of them leaves with a story. Some hear knocking when no one's there. Others wake to find a figure standing at the end of their bed. The bravest ones venture to the attic or basement, and many of them never make it through the night. Because in the Lemp Mansion, the dead never left. The Lemp Mansion is beautiful by day. Sunlight filters through the stained glass windows. The marble floors glow with a golden shine. And for a moment, you could almost forget the tragedies inside. Almost. But when night falls, the beauty rats away. The house changes. Guests have said it feels as if the walls lean closer, pressing in, the very air tightening like a noose. And in that suffocating darkness, the Lemps come alive again. It was in the 1970s when the house first opened to the public as a restaurant and inn. The new owners thought they were buying a piece of history. What they didn't know was that they had bought a prison for the dead. On the very first week, staff began complaining. A waiter cleaning the dining hall heard footsteps on the second floor. Heavy, deliberate, pacing footsteps. But the inn was empty, locked for the night. He went upstairs with a flashlight room by room, only to find each one dark, silent, and cold. When he returned to the dining hall, every chair he had stacked was back on the floor. Another worker refused to stay after hours. She claimed that while washing dishes, she saw a figure in the reflection of the kitchen window. A man standing just behind her shoulder, dressed in old-fashioned clothes. When she turned, the kitchen was empty, but the smell of cigar smoke hung in the air. The same cigars William Lemp Sr. was known to smoke before he put a bullet in his head. Word spread quickly, the Lemps were restless, and guests confirmed it. People who dared to rent rooms overnight reported being shaken awake by invisible hands. Some said they felt the mattress sink as if someone had sat beside them. One guest swore she woke up with icy fingers wrapped around her ankle, dragging her toward the floor. When she screamed, the fingers let go, but deep bruises appeared by morning. The attic became the most feared part of the mansion. That was where the so-called monkey-faced boy was said to have lived, hidden from the world. Visitors claimed to hear shuffling footsteps above their rooms at night, even when the attic was locked. Some heard the sound of a child crying softly, only to open the door and find nothing but dust and darkness. A paranormal team once left a recorder running in the attic overnight. When they played it back, the static wasn't empty. Through the crackling noise, a voice whispered a single word, "Help," and then came the basement. The mansion was built directly over the limestone caves once used for the brewery. Cold, wet, endless tunnels stretching beneath the earth. Employees hated going down there, even for storage. They said the air felt different, thicker, like breathing through water. Some refused to go at all. One night, a bartender went downstairs to grab supplies. He took a lantern and walked into the cavern. Halfway through, the light flickered, then died. For a few seconds, there was only blackness. That's when he heard it, a slow dragging sound, like something pulling across the stone floor. Then came footsteps, not his own, pacing behind him. He ran, tripping, scraping his hands on the stone, until he burst back upstairs, face pale as death. He quit the job that night. The stories kept piling up. A group of guests celebrating a birthday reported glasses sliding across the table without anyone touching them. Another group swore they saw a woman in white drifting down the staircase before vanishing into the wall. But perhaps the most terrifying accounts came from room 3, the room where Charles Lemp had taken his own life. Guests said the door often rattled violently, as if someone were trying to get out. Some heard gunshots in the middle of the night, echoing through the walls. Others claimed to wake with the sensation of a dog lying at their feet, only to remember that Charles shot his beloved dog before killing himself. The phantom dog, it seems, never left his side. Even the owners couldn't deny it anymore. The mansion wasn't just haunted, it was alive with tragedy. Reporters came, television crews arrived, ghost hunters begged for entry, and each one left with their own nightmare. But the strangest thing wasn't the sightings, the voices, or the footsteps. It was the feeling. Everyone who stayed in the mansion described it. A crushing sadness, a suffocating despair that settled into their bones. Some said it felt like being watched by someone who hated you. Others said it was worse, that it felt like the house wanted them to give up, to let go, to do what the Lemps had done. The mansion wasn't content with just replaying the past. It wanted to repeat it. And in that realization lies the true terror of the Lemp Mansion. It doesn't just hold ghosts, it holds despair itself, like a disease that spreads from generation to generation, from family to strangers, from the dead to the living. The Lemps may be gone, but the house is still hungry. By the late 1980s, the Lemp Mansion wasn't just a restaurant or an inn anymore. It had become a destination for those who crave the paranormal, a stage where the tragedies of the past replayed themselves for anyone brave or foolish enough to watch. Guests came with cameras, tape recorders, and courage in their pockets. But courage doesn't last long inside those walls. One of the earliest documented cases came from a young couple who decided to celebrate their anniversary at the inn. They booked one of the upper rooms and laughed at the stories told by the staff, brushing it all off as just ghost tales. That night, around 2 a.m, the husband awoke to the sound of someone weeping. The sound wasn't muffled through walls, it was right there in the room. He shook his wife awake, and together they listened to a woman's sobs echoing from the corner. When he turned on the lamp, the corner was empty, but the crying didn't stop. It grew louder, more desperate, until the wife swore she felt icy breath on her face. They packed their bags and left before dawn. Stories like this multiplied. In the dining room, chandeliers swayed with no breeze. In the hallways, guests claimed shadows darted across the floor, blocking their path before dissolving into the air. But the most disturbing encounters always seemed to circle back to the bedrooms where the Lemps died. One man, a traveling salesman, booked Charles Lemp's room without knowing its history. He told staff he had never believed in ghosts and wasn't afraid. At 3 a.m, a gunshot rang out, so loud that guests in neighboring rooms came running. But when they entered, the salesman was alone sitting upright in bed, pale and trembling. There was no gun, no smoke, no bullet hole. Only the faint smell of gunpowder lingering in the air. And then came the photographs. Paranormal investigators snapped dozens of pictures during their overnight stays. Again and again, strange figures appeared, faces half-formed, bodies and clothes from another century, shadows that moved when no one was near. In one particularly infamous photo, a boy's twisted face peers from the attic window, though the room was locked at the time. Locals whispered that it was him, the hidden child, the monkey face boy, still trapped, still watching, forever bound to the house. Reporters couldn't resist. News stations sent crews to spend the night. One cameraman, skeptical and smirking, set his equipment in the main hallway. At midnight, while adjusting his lens, he felt something brush past him. The hallway was empty. Minutes later, the sound tech screamed, his headphones filled with heavy breathing, though no one else heard it. On the playback, that same breath hissed through the speakers, followed by a faint male voice whispering, "Get out," but not everyone left. Some dared to challenge the mansion, to push it further. A group of college students, fueled by alcohol and arrogance, sneaked inside one night after closing. They wanted to spend the night in the basement caves, daring each other to last until morning. Hours passed, and the group grew restless. Then, out of the darkness, came a dragging sound, slow, heavy, scraping along the stone floor. The students laughed at first, shouting into the black, until one of them collapsed screaming. Something had scratched deep into his arm, 4 long marks, as if clawed by an unseen hand. They fled in terror, leaving their supplies behind. By sunrise, police found the cave empty, but the scratches on the boy's arm were very real. The mansion's reputation grew darker with every retelling. Some said the Lemps were punishing the living for daring to walk their halls. Others believed the house itself had become a living thing, feeding on fear, drawing in those who wanted proof, and giving them nightmares they'd never forget. And yet, people kept coming. Ghost tours filled the rooms, investigators begged for access, thrill seekers lined up to rent the haunted bedrooms. Each one walked in expecting a story, but most left shaken, unable to explain what they had experienced. Some left in tears, others swore never to return. There are even stories of people who never made it out. One legend tells of a drifter who sneaked into the mansion one winter night looking for shelter. He was never seen again. Days later, the staff complained of a foul odor drifting from the basement. They searched but found nothing. Some believe he never left, that his spirit joined the Lemps, one more soul swallowed by the house. The strangest part is that the mansion doesn't always show itself the same way. For some, it's footsteps, whispers, shadows. For others, it's pure despair, a weight that drives them to tears, anger, or madness without reason. A few have even claimed to feel the urge to harm themselves, as if the house is whispering the same dark promises that claimed the Lemp family long ago. What is it about this house that refuses to let go? Is it the grief of a family that lost everything? The curse of a hidden child locked away in shame? Or is it something far older, something drawn to the caves beneath the ground? A hunger that claimed the Lemps and now feeds on anyone who enters? Whatever the answer is, one thing is certain. The Lemp Mansion is no ordinary haunted house. It doesn't just remind you of death, it tries to pull you into it. And if you're not careful, you might not come back out. Today, the Lemp Mansion stands proud on Damno Place in St. Louis. Tourists pose for photographs outside, smiling in the daylight as if the house were just another piece of local history. They walk through the doors expecting old-world charm, a fine meal, maybe a ghost story to tell their friends. But few are prepared for what truly waits inside. Because the house remembers. It remembers the gunshots that rang through its halls, the sobs of children who lost their father, the scratching of a hidden boy who was never allowed to see the world. It remembers despair, and it does not forgive those who laugh at it. There is one story told quietly by the staff, a story not printed in guidebooks or splashed across ghost hunting shows. It happened late one night after the restaurant had closed. A young server, new to the job, stayed behind to finish cleaning. She had heard the ghost stories before, but she didn't believe them. She worked quickly, stacking chairs, wiping tables, humming to herself, and then she heard it, a voice. A man's voice, deep and low, calling her name. She froze, every hair on her body standing on end. She turned, but the dining room was empty. Only rows of chairs, polished wood, and shadows. She told herself it was her imagination, went back to work. But then the voice came again, louder this time, closer. Her name. She dropped her rag, heart hammering in her chest, and ran for the kitchen. She reached the door, hand trembling on the knob, and felt a hand close around her wrist. She screamed and spun, but no one was there. The pressure on her wrist was ice cold, crushing before it vanished. She quit the next morning. She never came back. Others have had similar encounters. Guests who checked in for the night only to check out hours later, pale and shaking, unwilling to talk about what they saw. Paranormal investigators who swore they captured voices on tape, but refused to play them back a second time. Even priests who visited the mansion whispered that it wasn't simply haunted, it was damned. But the most disturbing reports come not from those who see figures or hear footsteps. They come from those who feel something far worse, a pull, a heavy, invisible tug inside their chest, a darkness whispering that the easiest way to end the fear is to join the Lemps. Some say the house feeds on despair the way the family once fed on wealth. That every tear shed inside its walls, every scream, every ounce of terror only makes it stronger. And if that's true, then the mansion has grown very strong indeed. The rooms where William, Elsa, and Charles ended their lives still stand. And if you close your eyes in those rooms, you might feel the cold barrel of a gun pressing against your temple, hear the click of a trigger in the silence. Some guests say they wake to the sound of it. Some claim they smell fresh smoke, as if the shots had just been fired. And then there is the attic. Tour guides tell visitors not to linger there, not to whisper the name of the hidden boy, because sometimes, if you do, you'll hear an answer. A small broken laugh, a hand brushing your sleeve, or worse, a shadow crouched in the corner, its face twisted, its eyes begging you not to leave. No one knows what happened to him. No death certificate was ever found. No grave. Some believe he was buried in the caves, hidden forever from the world. Others believe he never died at all, that his suffering bound him to the mansion, a child in body, but not in spirit, his soul warped by decades of loneliness. And maybe that's the true heart of the Lemp Mansion's horror. Not just the suicides, not just the despair, but the idea that pain can live on, that grief can stain a house so deeply it becomes a living, breathing thing. The Lemp Mansion is open to anyone brave enough to step inside. You can sit at its tables, walk its halls, even sleep in its bedrooms. But remember this, many who enter swear they are not alone. They leave with bruises, scratches, voices burned into their memories. They leave knowing that the Lemps are still there, watching, and if you go, they'll be watching you too. So if you ever find yourself in St. Louis, and you see the grand old mansion standing proudly at the corner of the street, ask yourself, do you really want to go inside? Do you really want to hear the voices, feel the despair, and take the risk of carrying something back with you? Because the Lemp Mansion is not just haunted, it is hungry. And once you step inside, it may never let you go.